What I would like to do today is kind of do what I was going to do at the end, because I want to do that. And I'd made the slide and I don't want to waste it. And so we'll start at the end and move quickly forward, I hope. This is from somebody, we were talking about David Brooks. This is from his book, The Second Mountain, and he says, "Whenever I treat another person as if he were an object, I've ripped the social fabric. When I treat another person as an infinite soul, I have woven the social fabric. Whenever I lie, abuse, stereotype, or traumatize a person, I have ripped the fabric. Whenever I see someone truly and make them feel known, I have woven the fabric. Whenever I accuse someone of corruption without evidence, I have ripped the social fabric. Whenever I disagree without maligning motives, I have woven it. The social fabric is created through an infinity of small moral acts, and it can be destroyed by a series of immoral ones." We need to think about that in terms of our relationships with each other. Okay? We just do. And then this was going to be the assignment, but I want you to do this and keep it in your mind for the moment. Recall a time when you felt like you were the other. We have all been, I think, in settings when everybody knew everybody and we didn't know anybody. That's why it's so hard to break into a Sunday school class, by the way. Everybody knows everybody except you, and you don't know anybody. And there are all these inside jokes that you don't know about. And then we wonder, however intentionally good we might be to these people that come in, we wonder why they feel outside. It's not intentional. It's just the way it works out, okay? So keep those things in mind, and then list in your own mind persons you consider to be the other. We all have them. It might be your crazy uncle. Or as I used to say, my Baptist relatives. But anyway, that's another story. Okay, Now, having said that, now we can kind of get started, and we want to start again with another musical reference. This comes from probably 1962, 1961. Some of you can still fit that category. Thank you very much. It comes from the Kingston Trio, and it was a wonderful little song called The Merry Minuet. Okay, these were the first parts. They're rioting, and by the way, if you'll listen to this, remember it was written in 1962. It gets really weird, like right now. They're rioting in Africa. They're starving in Spain. There's hurricanes in Florida, and Texas needs rain. Some things never change. The whole world is festering with unhappy souls. The French hate the Germans hate the Poles, Italians hate Yugoslavs, South Africans hate the Dutch, and I don't like anybody very much. Okay? Now, why is that? I'm becoming more and more convinced that it doesn't have as much to do with hate as much as it has to do with fear. We're afraid of them. Which leads me to one of my favorite people, Molly Ivins. The story she told that most bears repeating is about our old pal John Henry Falk. Now there's a pair if you want to think about it. Okay. Who as a boy of 6 went with his 7-year-old friend Boots Cooper to rid the family hen house of a harmless chicken snake. From its high perch on the wooden shelf, the snake frightened the two kids who scrambled and clawed each other in their haste to escape. When Falk's mother later reminded the boys that chicken snakes don't hurt people, Boots Cooper responded, "Yes, ma'am, but some things will scare you so bad you hurt yourself." Which may explain how we deal with each other politically, etc. This is from Ben Howe. He's written a new book. Ben Howe, good, that doesn't keep showing up. He keeps wanting me to log in, and I don't want to log in. Okay. Has written a book called The Immoral Majority. Ben Howe was raised in an evangelical church by an evangelical pastor, and he is writing about how the evangelical have kind of lost their way. He says, I have come to believe that it is vitally important that as human beings we accept that we are all capable of being garbage. It has occurred to me that one of the quickest ways to thwart any possibility of personal growth is to assume such a thing is not within you. The key to being a good person is accepting that capacity to be garbage, as counterintuitive as that may sound. In other words, I'm trying to remind us as we gather here, when we start talking about our response to the other, we're not talking really about the other, we're talking about us. We cannot necessarily in any way fix the other. We can fix ourselves and how we respond. Okay? Then he says, broadly speaking, we have taken to confronting immorality by becoming immoral. But because our immorality is intended to stop an objectively worse immorality, we reason that it is not immoral. In other words, it's not wrong because I do it. Okay? Well, let's think about what it is wrong with what we are doing, rather than worrying about how much worse they are than we are. Remember, God may not grade on the curve, however much we wish it were true. Now, I want us to talk about a few things, and some of this I've said to some of you before, 2 things at least, just to remind us of how we operate when it comes to other people or life in general, okay? The first thing is something called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias, according to Merriam-Webster, is the tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with one's existing beliefs. In other words, I look for evidence for what I already think is true. This biased approach to decision making is largely unintentional and often results in ignoring inconsistent information. Existing beliefs can include one's expectations in a given situation and predictions about a particular outcome. People are especially likely to process information to support their own beliefs when the issue is highly important or self-relevant. In other words, if it affects me. Okay? A second thing, belief persistence. Belief persistence is defined as the use of reasoning to defend pre-existing beliefs, especially when one has previously defended those beliefs. And the more publicly you have defended those beliefs, the less likely you are to consider the possibility that you might be wrong. The story is told about this handwriting expert who, in a trial, got this guy convicted by his analysis. Later, it was proven that he was absolutely wrong. And yet he refused to accept the possibility that he was wrong because he had so publicly stated that he was right. That's belief persistence. So, think about this. If I say publicly, or to people that I hold dear, so-and-so is a jerk. Okay, well, what if it turns out that so-and-so is not a jerk? I will still defend my premise. Why? Because I've said it publicly. Now, this affects how we deal with each other. Because we make commitments publicly, or we have ideas that are in our head that we predict will be true, and so we begin to look for evidence that those people are exactly what we think they are. And any evidence that you give me to the contrary, I will discount, because you're probably just one of them anyway. Okay? I mean, that doesn't happen much, does it? Only if you watch cable television. Now, a few things from Willimon. I wish Jim were here. Bowen. He understands this stuff far more than I do. You'd be surprised how little brain science they teach in seminary. Yeah. Of course, they don't teach economics either, but that's not at all. Yeah. Okay, from page 23. Encounters with strangers require more brain work than meetings with friends, where our brains tell us to expend less energy and hunker down in our comfort zones among the familiar and the accustomed. Again, let's talk about a Sunday school class just for fun, since there are a couple of them here. Okay, you walk into your Sunday school class. Over here is this guy that you have gone to Big Bend with, yada, 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 yada. All these shared experience. Over here is someone you don't know from Adam. What's your immediate response? Hey, Bill, remember about Big Bend? And that doesn't mean you're evil, wicked, mean, or nasty. Well, maybe one of two. Anyway, what it means is that's our tendency of our minds. That's the way our minds work, to go to the familiar. So if I'm in a situation where I'm in a room and I'm the only one like me there. The Methodist Church talks a great deal about why there are no black people in our church on Sunday morning. Well, duh. If you walk in and you're the only black person there, it's just hard. It's just hard. Now, if you're in a multiracial community, there is a possibility because, for example, military chaplaincies. Military is a highly integrated organization. And so, worship is not an issue. Integrated worship is not an issue. Okay? Okay. Now, the neurological response to danger comes upon us faster, is more intense, lasts longer, and is more difficult to displace than the response to reward. In competition with other emotions, hang on to this one, even strong ones like lust, fear tends to best them all in intensity of engagement of our whole limbic or emotional system. Fear will shut us down. Okay? On 24, he quotes David Rock. He cites research that shows that when we experience a threat, we, 1, think less clearly, 2, have difficulty receiving and assimilating new information, 3, make mistakes in perception and interpretation coming to false deductions, and 4, tend to respond negatively to situations, focusing on the downside and taking less risk. We're just afraid. This is 24. The adrenaline system that is pumped into our nervous system to help protect us from a perceived threat makes us more confident in our judgments when in fact our ability to make good decisions is considerably reduced by fear. We think we're smarter than we are. Okay? And so, and this will come as a great surprise to all of you, Bader Say calls the manipulation and feeding of our fears the fear for profit syndrome. Politicians, advertisers, and sometimes even religious leaders use fear as a powerful motivator, a means to exploit others for their advantage. Remember the movie The President? Remember? Was it President? Where, oh gosh, at the end, he finally, the president finally gets some nerve up, and he starts talking about, he said, the only thing that these people are interested in is telling you who to be afraid of. And then to tell you that they're the ones that can fix it. If you've ever been to a revival, on the last night of the revival, most times the altar call is predicated in fear. You might want to come down to the front tonight because, who knows what's going to happen to you on the way home. I heard that one. I was going to do it. This was out in West Texas. Most of my fun stories are from West Texas. I was supposed to help with this funeral. And this was in San Angelo. And 1 minute before the time, a nephew was supposed to help. Well, he was supposed to do the main part of the service. At 1 minute till, nephew hadn't gotten there yet. And so the funeral director, who I knew, came in. He said, John, we're in kind of a world of hurt here. He said, can you go ahead and do the funeral? I said, yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. Well, we got through the funeral there at the funeral home, and as we finished, I saw him come in, a guy come in the back with that petrified look on his face that you get when you are late. We all know that one. Okay. So I met him, and I said, look, I'm just here to help. You can just go ahead and handle the interment. So we drove out to the cemetery at Christoval, and we were all standing there in the heat. And that guy had a sermon that he had prepared. And by golly, he was going to do it one way or the other. Let me summarize the sermon for you, because I can. Our brother is dead, but we will see him someday. At least some of us will. And if you want to be one of those, you might want to talk to me after the service. And I turned to my friend Vancourt. I should never have been standing next to Vancourt because we had similar senses of humor. And I said, my God, Richard, he's doing an altar call. He said, yeah, there'll be a collection in about the next 3 minutes. Okay. That we operate too often out of fear because we can control with fear. How often do we try to get our children to do stuff? You want to do that? Well, when your dad gets home, and then we wonder why dad is always a symbol of terror, to kids. Okay, now, let's move on. Again, citing Rock. Neuroscientists are learning the power of expectation over our brain functioning. Rock defines expectation as the feeling induced by the prospect of a possible reward, that visceral sense that something or someone good is heading our way. Expectation is thus a primal motivator of our toward response. In other words, if I walk up and I think being with you is going to be good, I move in with the expectation that it is going to be good, and most likely it will be. On the other hand, negative expectations tend to magnify the actual threat of others, as the data on racial profiling by police shows. If we think someone is likely to be a criminal, we will treat them as a crook. In other words, if I think you're a jerk, you're going to prove it to me. And it ain't going to be hard. Okay? Now, Rock actually claims that we use that's what I wanted to ask Jim if this was right. We use one set of brain circuits for thinking about people you believe are like you, and a different set for those you view as different from you. It's not even the same part of your brain. And by the way, scientists will tell you that we make it if we move into a brand new situation or meet a new person, whatever, we will decide within the first 2 to 3 seconds whether or not this is going to be a positive or a negative experience. A good friend of mine, a retired pastor, said one of the things that absolutely drives him crazy about his wife is that she will decide immediately whether somebody's any good or not. He said, and what really makes me mad is that she's never wrong. Well, we're often never wrong. Why? Because we have a preconceived notion of what they're going to be before we ever start. Okay. Now, we're going to do video here in a second, and here's what I want. What did you hear in the video? And second, listen toward the end for the idea that our fears are conquered not so much through better ideas, but actual living encounters. And I wonder if you have found that to be true in your own life. David, do you know how to switch this over to VCR? If you don't, I do. I can come back and do it. I finally got a lesson. Here, I get it. No, I think okay, now the question is, how do we get to the play? Okay, do that. Let's see if this is number 2. Please, number 2. Bingo.
In the last chapter, we talked about fear of the other. And just how in that fear, we're unable to see God's grace. And how God, we being the other, God chose us, God came to us. This week we're discussing why fear is a natural human reaction to danger. Both the danger that's perceived and misperceived. We give some practical advice about how to self-regulate our natural feelings of fear. Will you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think it's important to maybe begin by admitting fear. You mentioned it's a natural thing. Another way to think about it, fear is a gift from God. I know as a parent, one of your big jobs is to induce appropriate fear into your children. Don't go toward the street. Don't pick that up and eat it. Fears. Fear is one of the ways God has given us to survive, to appropriate self-protection. It is an irony, though, that some of the dumbest things we do out of fear. In fact, I know that brain physiology shows that in the amygdala and all, when we encounter a threat, it immediately starts producing various hormones, brain chemicals, and so the kind of deliberative, rational parts of our brain start shutting down, and fear literally takes over our brain so that we respond to the immediate threat. That's good. That's adaptive when we're faced with a threat. However, though most of us also experience that fear often is totally out of proportion to the threat. Part of growing up is not only learning the right fears, what to fear rightly, but it's also learning how to control your fears. I remember an undergraduate at Duke telling me that she thought the whole purpose of education is to deal with your fears. I fear taking chemistry. I don't know anything about chemistry. I'm not good in science, and something like this. Well, I think maybe life in general is a matter of saying, Lord, give me the grace to take this perfectly natural tendency and not let it take me over and keep me from some of the richest experiences that I have. But many of our fears are unjustified and irrational. Somebody's noted that we fear foreign terrorists in America, and yet many more people died in the hands of domestic terrorists than foreign terrorists. To me, that's just kind of an example of sort of bad thinking induced by fears that are unexamined and out of control. And you remember all those moments in Scripture where Jesus said to his disciples, "Be not afraid." So I kind of claim that part of the Christian life is learning what to fear rightly. For instance, in a number of places in Scripture, it's talking about the fear of the Lord, fearing God. Wait a minute, what is that about? And then I note that it's kind of ironic. We fear strangers and others who have been commanded by Jesus to welcome and receive. We sort of fear them more than we fear disappointing God. So maybe think of the Christian faith as a long process of letting God help us deal with our perfectly natural but often very destructive fear. A doctor was saying to me that he had a patient, and the patient was really concerned about eating meat with hormones in it. And he said, "Yeah, there's research on that, and and she said, "Well, I drive 20 miles to get to a store where there's no hormone beef or chicken." And he said, he asked her, he said, "But you don't smoke, do you? Because I see some signs." She said, "No, just a pack or so a day." And he said, "Oh, hey, don't worry about the hormones. Okay, we got other things." And for this doctor to say, it's interesting how we focus on certain things as being fearful when just a little thinking about that doesn't make any sense. Well, I think fear can be a seminal thing, and that maybe we ought to say that as Christians we wade into our fears, we encounter our fears with Jesus. And Jesus says, "Don't be afraid of me, don't be afraid of God, believe in me," but also says, "Don't be afraid of your brothers and sisters. I intend for them to be your family, your sisters and brothers in my body of the church. So live into that." In fact, I might say that if there are those who are listening to our conversation in a group, maybe one reason they're in this group, maybe one reason they're reading this book is they're doing this, saying, "Lord, I don't want the wrong fears to govern me. Help me with my fear." And one way you're doing that is in this group.
You know, I often wonder if even in this conversation about fearing and where we put our fears, do we conveniently fear certain things and certain people in order not to address something that's really about us and not necessarily about them? And am I afraid of seeing you and hearing you and experiencing you because it's going to bring out some things about me?
I remember my wife and I were in Egypt as tourists, and we were there at the time. There'd been a terrorist incident, and the economy was terrible, and there were very few tourists, and people were just desperate to sell things. And we were in a shop, and the man, we were trying to buy a piece of sculpture or something from the man, and we were asking about the price and all. And then suddenly he said, "Oh, gotta go, close up." And we said, "Wait, it's the middle of the morning." And he said, "No, let's go." And then he pushed us out the door. And we said, wait, we haven't bought our purchase. "Oh, well, come back." And we said, "Well, you can't come back." And I said to him, why on earth are you closing? And he said, I've got to go pray. I go pray. And my wife and I sat there, and my wife said, do you know one single person, name one person now, you're a pastor, that would forego a sale for prayer? And we sat there, and that man, I'll say his openness was a threat to me. It really made me turn around and say, wow, I pray, but wow, have I ever given up anything to be a person of prayer? I don't think so.
In this chapter, you talk about reappraisal. And you talk about how we train our fears, and instead of pushing people away, is the act of pulling people in. And how that helps us think more clearly and be more confident in that relationship of meeting and being with someone else. Will you talk to us a little bit more about that?
You know, I think it's part of that dynamic that perhaps you experienced as a child when I mentioned that I was always frightened to go down into the basement, but my mother would say, no, I'll go down there with you. Hold my hand, we'll go down and see. There's nothing to be afraid of in the basement. And I would look around and all. I can still remember that. Well, in a way, I think, as Christians, in a way, God takes our hand and says, come on, let me introduce you to one of my beloved children that I love as much as I love you. Perhaps a person's faith, a person's life and intelligence can be measured by, now how many fears have you overcome? I have a friend who suddenly developed a phobia about flying in airlines, and so he signed up for a course on fear of flying. And they said he met airline mechanics, and they went down to the garage and they watched them work on airplane engines, and they got on the plane and they got this and that. And I think, I wish more congregations would be places where we say, we know you're burdened about the racial divide in America. We know you're troubled by that. Well, come to our congregation and we'll help you work on that. We'll give you situations, contexts in which you can surprise yourself and you can feel God's grace working in you to grow.
You know, as I think about the book, and you talking about your friend just now, the friend who was so afraid of flying, he had an intention. He had decided that he no longer wanted to live in fear. I wonder, and as I think about that, what does it mean for us to have fear of one another? But even in the story you just shared about this couple, just having a space to be in, how much of that you would say is us just being open to show up?
It is crucial. Physical, bodily presence, facial interaction, and I think it's crucial to this. I know a woman, and after our president made, I think, a terrible remark about Muslims, she said the next morning at work, she said there was a woman who worked in a nearby office, and she said she'd noticed her in America in the head scarf, and said she didn't know her, but she said she got up late and she said, could I take you to lunch today? And the woman said, lunch? Oh, okay, yeah. So we went to lunch, and she said, here's who I am. And she said, I've seen you. And she said, are you Muslim? And the woman said, yes. And she said, I just want to say I'm an ordinary person. I work in the department next door, and I'm sorry. And he said the woman broke down in tears. Said we hugged one another. And the woman said to her, I'm just so frightened. And so we talked and said, now we have lunch together every day. But I was saying, wow, you are a model to me, and how many ways we need to show up and just say, hello, would you like, can we talk? And I think the church can be a way for that. I remember someone from Alcoholics Anonymous saying to me when I was talking about a parishioner in my church, I was trying to get to go to AA, and I said, well, I admire the AA 12-step program so much, and I said, if an alcoholic gets to the point of being willing to bear the pain to walk into that group, they're almost there. You know, I've written a book on fear of the other. I actually think, though, the way these fears are conquered, maybe the way all fears are conquered, it's not so much through better ideas, but by actually living encounters and saying, wow, I now, this that I once feared, I no longer fear. I'm thinking, maybe it's like Jesus says, hey, I've enjoyed welcoming and forgiving you. I've enjoyed watching you grow. Now why don't you try it with somebody else and be surprised that I'm at work?
So I know that we've talked about training our fears and recognizing just the neurological experience and how it manifests in us, having those fears, even fears from childhood. I really look forward to next week as we really start continuing the conversation about fear, but you call us to learn to fear like Christians. And so it'll be very interesting for us to unpack what does that actually mean.
I look forward to that too.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Will.
So what did you hear? Anything interesting to you? What do you think about that? What? Talk to me.
Just the thing that was most, not eye-opening, but most, I would say something that I have experienced is going out and meeting the other, that face-to-face interaction. Some of us that work with the homeless women or the homeless breakfast and so forth. Everybody thinks, oh, these are terrible people and so forth. I know them now. A lot of them are my friends. It is something that a lot of people are too scared to do because they are the other. The same with the Muslims, Ann and Randy and I have made friends with the Muslim community people that are from Turkey, and they have invited us to their fundraising dinner or so forth. Lovely people, not something ever to be scared of. Very, very great ideas and very similar beliefs to helping the other and so forth. So that face-to-face interaction totally makes your fears go away.
Or at least it helps you understand your fears a little better.
Maybe.
Others? Yeah. Good.
Brian Stevenson, the book we read, Just Mercy, a few years ago, some of y'all may have read, calls what you're talking about getting proximate.
Getting what?
Getting proximate.
Okay.
Get next to it.
Yeah.
That you can't do that sitting in your own living room.
No.
Yeah.
Or sitting in your own sanctuary. Because you're not going to be next to us.
My upbringing was different in that I was raised in the Rio Grande Valley. Okay, as I mentioned, I think last time, the population breakdown in the valley is 80-20. And the 20 was me. Okay? I went to school for 6 years, not in grade school. We were segregated grade school. With Hispanics. I played football with Hispanics. I played basketball. I ran track with Hispanics. And they lived out past me. We lived 4 miles out, and I had the car. They didn't. And so I would drive them home. And I'm not beginning to tell you that all the barriers were broken down, because they weren't in 1963 at all. But I knew them. And now when we gather 50 some odd years later for reunions, the relationship is entirely different. And even those barriers that existed back then do not exist now, because we've all lived so long and been through so much. I do think there is a value in just showing up and being willing to just show up and be there for them and let them be there for you. I mentioned last week, twice a week I work out with Mo, and Mo is a white gentleman, and incredibly smart young man, entrepreneur of the first order. He's always telling me his next idea, and I'm just, you know. And we talk about this stuff, and he'll ask me questions, and I'll ask him questions. And there's still some stuff there. But it's not what it used to be. Because we invested, how many years? 3 or 4 years with each other twice a week for an hour while he's killing me. When he was talking, this comes up, and then we'll quit. But when he was talking about the lady that was afraid about hormones, who was smoking a packet, those of us who are old enough to remember when George Carlin first came out, his bit was that it was a newscast. Remember? Okay. Hal Sweet. And one of the characters was Hal Sweet, your hippy-dippy weatherman, who was, drugged out, and so one night he said, well, if you look at the radar, you'll see thunderstorms coming in, but if you look closer, you'll see 3 Russian ICBMs, so don't sweat the thunderstorm. And I felt like that when he said, well, I'm worried about hormones. Well, yeah, but you're smoking a pack a day. Hormones may not be your issue, okay? Well, why do we pick that danger as opposed to the more present danger? Could it be because we do this? Huckleberry Finn, talking about his aunt. She caught him dipping snuff one day. And she launched into him about it and said how she would never do that because she wanted to go to the good place. No, he wasn't dipping snuff. She caught him smoking. That's what it was. And he said, I got thinking about it. And here she was worrying about Moses and all this other who was dead and nobody knew anyway. And I got thinking, if she was going to be there, I didn't think I wanted to be there. So, but that, and then he said in the last line, and she dipped snuff. But that was all right because she did. We're very excusing of ourselves. We are not excusing of other people, especially if we didn't like it to begin with. It's always interesting to me to watch political campaigns over the years. Not just now. But when they're in, whoever they are, I'm very critical of what they do. But if my people are in, and they do roughly the same thing, what? Well, there's some extenuating circumstances and whatever. On a large scale, that's what we do. Okay. It's time to go. And we'll do it again next time. Okay? Thank you all. Bye.